Hello, Galaxy! I'm Chris Perrillo, and I'm monitoring the live stream over here, making sure that everything's going to work fine because I am my own producer. You are your own viewer. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for setting the notification because you can do that. I don't know if you knew that. I think a lot of people do. They call themselves the notification squad now, I guess, on YouTube. You press the little bell button and then you're notified when I upload a new video. Thank you for that. Thank you for the likes, the constructive, valuable comments you've been leaving, the follows, the subscribes, the engagement, really, the interaction that I've seen from you, the greater part of the community, over the past week or two, which gives me more energy to do the things that you say I didn't do anymore. But I still do. I still do a lot. As a matter of fact, last night I stayed up processing a video, a comparison between the iPhone 7 Plus camera and the iPhone 8 Plus camera. And that video is going out possibly tomorrow. And the patrons over on chrisperillo.com, my Patreon campaign for tech, they will get that video before it goes public for everybody soon enough. So thank you, everybody, for doing what you do. So I thought today we would do a live comparison between the iPhone 7 Plus and the 8 Plus, and I prefer doing these videos live because I have the value of the interactivity in chat. So if you have a certain question that I have not addressed in the course of this laundry list of things that I want to cover, let me know in chat live or even after the fact, because I'm certainly following up with comments. If you want your comment to bubble to the top, you press the little $ button, it creates super chat, and then I'm able to see your comment. It jumps up above the rest. So let's go ahead and begin with the differences between the two. Now, I'm not going to sit there and show you the screens. They are on, but you've seen an iPhone before. That's really not what I want to spend the time talking about. The size and the shape of each iPhone, I mean, yes, they're slightly different, but to give you an indication, I'm using my inductive charging Mophie juice pack case on the new iPhone 8 Plus that came directly off of the iPhone 7 Plus here. So perceivably, they're pretty much the same. I'm able to use similar accessories on the 8 Plus, that I had used on the 7 Plus. I like this inductive charging case. I've been using it ever since Mophie sent it because it not only has an extra battery in there, and I do use it frequently, but you can also effectively use these external battery packs to slap on top of the battery pack to give it even more juice, and no wires. So they've done an amazing job with that, and I'll certainly cover that feature again or come back to it when I get to it. But I did want to talk about the size. It looks and feels similar. This is something that apparently is a complaint from some people, that they look the same, that they've been looking the same for years. I think that actually plays to its strength. I don't look at that as a drawback. I don't ever get a phone necessarily for what it looks like. I seem to be the exception to the rule. Like, I guess everybody else talks about what it looks like, and I'm like, I'm not going to say who cares, because obviously people care, but to me what matters most is the experience that it drives. That's what drives me to upgrade. But Apple knows the marketplace, and they know that people are going to be driven by that decision. I think it's not a great decision to make, specifically when there's money involved. But if you look at the valuable path for an upgrade, you should be looking, you as a discerning person of taste, would want to get something that's going to improve your experience, not just something that just looks different, right? It's not just about looking different. It's about making your life better. It's making your life easier. That was the whole, the power of marketing of the Apple that we once knew, the Apple that no longer exists, as we very well know and have established. I'm not going to slag Apple for it looking the same. I think it's fine. Not to say that it couldn't look different, but don't just do different for the sake of being different. Do it for a reason. What's the value of doing it differently? What is it going to do for me? And I obviously don't like the path that they're going down with the 10. I'm not alone. But I will not sit here and slag Apple for having the same design. Just won't do it. Pez Liz just did a super chat by pressing that little icon and says, will you test out an iPhone 10 in the store? Oh, you're killing me, Liz. That is a great question. I have no intention on buying an iPhone 10. I know there's a conspiracy saying I will. No, I don't plan on getting one. Even at a distance, and as I get through this, you'll better understand why I would not spend the money on one. Uh, I would probably try one in the store. Just to say, well, I've tried it. Uh, I don't need to try it to tell you it's a catastrophe in the making. I've demonstrated and illustrated with screenshots in videos over the past week, and I know not everybody has watched every video that I've done. That's a long time to spend with me. Um, but even on Twitter, I mean, if you want to look at my mentions, just look at the people tweeting screenshots. And if this stuff's happening on existing iOS devices, if you think it's going to be different on the new device, it's going to be worse because you have to deal with the design nightmare now known affectionately as the notch. So yeah, I'll probably try one in store. I'm not looking forward to it. I will tell you that much right now. It's like, not because I don't want to be proven wrong. I know what a UX disaster is. I know what a UI disaster is. I know how Apple is bending over backwards to accommodate this monstrosity. I know how apologists are bending over backwards to accommodate these monstrosities. So sure, just to say I did it, but it's like, what am I gonna? Oh, the notch! It completely disappears. I don't think I'm ever going to say that. I know myself and my experience enough to tell you I don't think that's going to happen, and that really has nothing to do with pride. I will be more than happy to, recant and say I was wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I really don't. Every experience in me tells me I'm not wrong. So let's go ahead and talk about software, my favorite topic. Really one that a lot of these reviewers don't cover. These so-called techies that concentrate. Oh, it's got a forehead and a chin. It looks the same. Tell us something we don't know. So software, iOS 11. Now it's my turn to put on the conspiratorial tinfoil hat. And by the way, the reason, if I didn't mention this, the reason why we're doing this topic this morning, I gave you a chance to vote on Twitter. I gave you a poll. Either I'm going to talk about the headphone conspiracy or the headphone problem. Let's talk about that. I still want to talk about it. Or this topic. So you voted for this topic. The experience of iOS 11. Oh God, do we have all morning? Okay, I'm going to try to keep this brief, which for me, 2 hours is brief. So iOS 11 is the same for the most part on the iPhone 8 Plus versus the iPhone 7 Plus. It's the same, and that's not something that's positive. It's not even perfunctory. It's not good. In fact, I believe because of the alleged speed, not just by randomly swiping and clicking and pointing and synthetic benchmarks, just the alleged speed of the iPhone 8 Plus hardware, you would think that it would mitigate some amount of the sloppiness in terms of frame rate consistency in iOS 11. It does not. It does not eliminate all of it. Now, some have argued, they've tried, well, you need to use the phone longer because after the setup, this is how I think they sound in real life. They probably don't sound like this in real life. You got to do the setup and the caching, and it'll get faster. Dude, okay. I understand what you mean, right? And that's even something that I tried to better explain when I was doing my initial review, my setup, the initial impressions. Yeah, I understand that the animation has to be cached, and after it's cached, sometimes it gets smoother. What I'm telling you is that even after everything's done, restoring and completing, doing all that, the iPhone 8 Plus with iOS 11 in its current state, final product after beta testing, public beta testing, private beta testing, it's been baking for a year. It doesn't run very well. Let's not talk about the slop, okay? That's very well established. The sloppy layout, and that's been happening since iOS 7. What I'm telling you is that the software doesn't necessarily get any better on faster hardware, which to me speaks to the insane lack of quality control with Apple software. Now, that said, some have argued, and I don't know where I sit on this, and I'm actually thinking about doing a deeper dive video on this topic alone. Apple intentionally slows down iOS devices that aren't new. And this is something that's been seen in Google Trends, an unbiased data source. Effectively, when a new iPhone comes out, suddenly searches for slow iPhone increase. Because what happens is people get as well they should, the latest, operating system upgrade. I'm not suggesting you should avoid it, but what I'm saying is new versions of iOS now make older phones and iOS devices in general, including iPads, worse. New iOS versions make older hardware. Older hardware worse. That is an absolute. I can tell you demonstrably that the iPhone 6s absolutely took a performance hit. Like, I mean, bam! Like, even Diana noticed. And you want to say, if your position is, well, Chris, you just notice things other people don't notice. Like, that's not true. I all the time. Certainly I do, but even when, someone who I would consider just the average user, like my wife, sits there and says, it's running more slow than it has. Like, it takes seconds the app launches, and then it takes seconds for the app to actually start responding, on top of the other stuff. So, yeah, the iPhone 6s definitely took a hit. I can only imagine what happened with the other ones. Now, even in comparing the iOS performance in the iPhone 8 Plus versus the 7 Plus, at first I thought, okay, it's not that much of a difference. It's still bad, but it wasn't that much of a difference. But the more I started to use the iPhone 7 Plus features alongside this iPhone 8 Plus features, I'm sitting here telling you definitively, and I just ran like a full battery of, not a battery test, but a full battery of camera tests and photo tests yesterday. And every single time, it was like the iPhone 7 Plus was choking where it never choked before, like sputtering. I'm like, dude, this device is like a year old. You can't tell me that just magically overnight it started doing this if it wasn't in relation to the software that was running. So I'm sitting here telling you, in every device experience I've had with iOS 11, it tends to perform worse than I would say in relation to the iPhone 8 Plus, which is the best. Now, this is me being generous. The best iOS experience, kind of ish, that you can get in a smartphone today. I'm not really lying. It's a mistruth. It's not an amazing experience, but it does iOS a little better. The iPhone 8 Plus does iOS 11 just marginally better than the iPhone 7 Plus. Enough to warrant an upgrade. See, this is where it really gets conspiratorial. This is what people allege. I'm inclined to believe that I don't want to believe that Apple's doing this for nefarious purposes. I don't want to believe that. But what drives sales? What drives money? What drives revenue? What drives stock prices? Purchases, buying behaviors. And if you don't release something new, they're not going to buy it. What's the value of improving free software? The software is the gateway to buy hardware, right? So if you can see a better experience and an expensive upgrade, well, you're going to take that path, possibly. I'm not going to slag you for taking that path. I would take the same path as well. But I think that it's reinforcing a very, very poor plan, I believe. That's not the most accurate word I could come up with right now, but hey, what do you want? This is live. So, I'm a little put off by it, but as I said, I want to dive more deeply into that thought process in a separate video. So software, iOS, still iOS, but it will make older devices like the iPhone 7 Plus perform worse. The iPhone 8 Plus barely gets a pass, and I don't even give it a pass. I mean, it's just egregiously poor in so many spots. And I'm talking in terms of frame rate issues and skipping issues and stuttering issues. I know some people don't like that word, but the jank that people used to hit Android for all the time exists on iOS, in a far more prevalent way than Android for sure. This is not an Android video. In terms of raw performance, I think I've noticed maybe you get a faster launch of an app on the iPhone 8 Plus over the 7, and I don't think that's an upgrade is warranted with that. But here's something that I've had happen on the iPhone 8 Plus that I've never seen before on an iOS device. Never seen before specifically. I'm getting a notification saying, look at the chat. I am, but I gotta stay on point. I will get to the chat, I swear. I'm seeing, thank you everybody, thank you. Even, I'm just going to read this out loud. You should vote with your money, buy something different. Here's the The problem is Apple knows. They know that they have you in their ecosystem. They know. What's the chance of you jumping ship and going to another platform versus just sticking with it because it's too painful to move? They know what they're doing. That's not a conspiracy. That's an economic genius model. They know. It's almost monopolistic. Okay, so back to the path I need to stick on here. Thank you. This is something that hasn't happened yet. Randomly, without any provocation, in any app, doing anything, nothing or something, suddenly the entire system performance drops to like 15 frames per second, like dramatically. And if you don't notice a drop between 60 frames per second, even with skips, down to 15 frames per second, wow. And it's happened more than once. This is freaking me out. I'm like, what is happening? Like, everything was fine. Everything was set up. Nothing was going on. Every app, everything, scrolling all the way to animations, all the way to just any process moving in and or out of the app. Everything just like a 15 frames per second hit. And I was like, what's going on? And the first time it happened, I'm like, I hope this goes away. But it appears and disappears just as quickly, just as randomly. So I tweeted this the other day, and like 3 people said, yeah, it's been happening since iOS 7. I'm like, are you kidding me? How have I not seen this? Like, this is something that I would absolutely see, and I don't know if it's something related to the hardware. I don't know if it's something related to the software in relation to the hardware. But I tell you what, if that keeps up for the next week, the random thing that hits, if it happens one more time, I will exchange it. I will. Now, some might say, well, why don't you just get rid of it? Again, I go back to the idea of objectivity. If you want me to continue to talk about Apple and iOS, I've got to use at least one of the products that I believe I can actually get along with. But this was just a nightmare scenario. But the problem is like a car, right? It's making a funny sound. You take it into the mechanic, it doesn't make the funny sound. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid it won't appear when I go to the Apple store and say, what's this? So, and I can't exactly carry around another camera with me all the time. Be ready to record. Click, and oh, it's recording. Look, I'm demonstrating in 60 frames per second, the 15 frames per second on this phone. So I don't know. Have you ever seen that? Never before. And it's just hitting me randomly. It's just it's too much. It's well, it's none of my business. But Apple could improve it in software. Will they? Doubt it. So in terms of consistency, in using iOS 11, that is the first time I've ever run into a problem like that, specifically on the iPhone 8 Plus. Never ran into it on the 7 Plus. But consistency, I would say, is the same between the iPhone 7 Plus and the 8 Plus. What you can expect from iOS, minus what the aforementioned faults, the frame drops and animation skips and jank. It's less so a little bit marginally on the iPhone 8 Plus. In terms of responsiveness, nothing gets better after setup or after caching on either one, but it's far worse on the iPhone 7 Plus. Any older iOS device, it's worse. If anybody sits there and tells you otherwise, I don't know how much I would trust their opinion or validity in terms of telling you that iOS is fine on older devices. This is not, it is a coffee cup. People are asking, I guess. It's got green tea. So genmai cha. It's like sencha leaf and brown rice. It says, you don't know the power of the dark side. Hello, Darth Vader. See, I am listening to chat. I'm reading. Wicket is still alive. Our dog Wicket and Pixie, they're downstairs. Luckily, they're not barking. He may bark now. In terms of transparency, now this was something that I was kind of shocked to see. The control center now has, this interesting layout. Not sure I quite like it yet, but it does work. I'll give it that. I believe that it handles better. The control center handles better on the 8 Plus versus the 7 Plus. If you try the animation now, control center now on the 7 Plus, you'll see a lot of dropped frames and jank when you push it up, especially if you push up the control center over some screen that already has transparency. When you layer like more than one transparency layer on top of another, then you start really seeing it's bad on the 7 Plus. It's better on the 8 Plus, but here's another thing I noticed. This is something that Android gets slagged for all the time with responsiveness. This is something that you may have seen before, and I have to bring it in as an example because, again, it's been slagged. On an Android device, when you scroll up, your finger's already here, but then it takes like maybe a second or so for the rest of the content to get to where your finger is. That's like responsiveness. So you go on an Android, you go, and then like a little bit later, the content comes up to meet your touch point. The same thing is now happening on iOS, specifically with the control center. And if you don't believe me, try it. Drag your finger up quickly and watch to see how much time it takes for the control center to catch up with you with any layers of transparency on the iPhone 8 Plus or the iPhone 7 Plus or any iOS device. And then start doing this and watch how when your finger's down, it'll do this. It can't keep up. Like the responsiveness of the alleged, amazing responsiveness of the iOS device in, the new iPhone and the hardware. I'm not seeing it. Yeah, the control center is just one example of that, but an example that I can demonstrate time and time again in terms of responsiveness. So if it can't even handle something as simple as a control center, it makes you kind of wonder what else it can't handle. Someone says they don't see it on Android. You're one of those blessed people who just can't see the things that other people can, but it absolutely is there. It's getting better, though. You know why? Because Tony works on Android. Tony Murray. You should follow him on Twitter. Works on Android and Google, or Google's Pixel specifically, to improve responsiveness on Android devices. Apple has no such position in its organization at all. So at least they've got their eye on the prize. Google, to their credit, but it's not about Google. I just had to use the example because you can't ignore the other camp at this point. In terms of app refreshes, like with the amount of RAM that we have in here, I think about 3 gigs or so. I don't know. It's a spec. I find that, task switching between an app I just had open and the other app just to be about the same, pretty poor, in terms of like I open an app and I jump to another and then I go back to the app and then it has to refresh itself. Happens frequently. It happens more frequently than I would like. Given that, I use certain apps on a more frequent basis, I'm just surprised they refresh so much. And that's kind of maddening to me. I guess I'm used to it, though. You just acclimate to it because what else are you going to do on an iOS device? Not run the apps. I'm not going to clear them out of the background as a background process because they're honestly not taking up any space. Any space that's going to be, hit performance, at any perceivable level. App refreshes are the same on the iPhone 8 Plus as the iPhone 7 Plus. So if that was a frustration, you should know it doesn't necessarily get any better. Battery life, in my estimation, despite having put the battery pack on the iPhone 8 Plus, about the same. I don't feel like it's draining anymore. Not that I've had a lot of time with it, but this is an area where I really believe Apple's been accurate in terms of what it is they state and what it is that actually plays out. Battery life will certainly improve the less you use a device, but that's kind of not the idea. I believe in just running the battery into the ground. I mean, what else is the point? Just run it into the ground, man. And then when it's done, get a new device. So the battery life similar. I believe Apple as far as their specs are concerned. So back to the charging, and I guess I'll lightly touch on the issue because I did have to mention it at the top of the hour. How far are we? The inductive charging works very well in terms of the iPhone 8 Plus versus the iPhone 7 Plus. But that's the thing. I've had inductive charging for a year or so. So I'm very, very happy to be able to use the same case. Yes, I know it's kind of like inductive charging on top of inductive charging, but the reason I'm using this battery pack is because I know I'm going to be draining battery more. Number one. Number two, it's a case. Number three, I really like it. I mean, yeah, it adds some bulk to the phone, but it's the best. I mean, I haven't used them all, but the fact that I'm using it still is testament to its build and its quality and its value. So if you want inductive charging, don't think the only way to get it on an iPhone is specifically with an iPhone 8 Plus. You can get a case and put it on your iPhone 7 Plus or your iPhone 6S or whatever the case is that they make specifically that's compatible with your device. So wireless charging that still uses a cord. Inductive charging is an extreme value. I'm sitting here telling you it's not unique to the iPhone 8 outright. You can use a case, which you may already use or you may want to use anyway, to effectively give that feature. But it's a nice bonus to have. It's just not. It's not new to me in the iPhone experience. It doesn't have to be new to you. I'm just trying to save you money. If you're thinking, well, I want to upgrade because of the inductive charging, well, save yourself a few $100s and stick with what you have that may work well enough in every perceivable way. In terms of the display quality, I think the True Tone display is nice. I like it. This is not something that I would necessarily drive an upgrade for me in terms of my experience with the iPhone 7 Plus versus the iPhone 8 Plus, but it's been nice. It's just been a wonderful little bonus, and you don't really see it until you compare one screen to another. The iPhone 7 screen, in comparison, looks cooler, running a bit more cool or blue compared to the iPhone 8 Plus screen that is running a little warmer with True Tone on. I have no reason to turn it off. But I've seen it marketed in spots where I'll be scrolling, let's say, a Twitter feed and seeing photos and avatars, and they seem to be on the True Tone display on the iPhone 8 Plus, seem to be a bit more balanced, cleaner, brighter, despite having the brightness level set the same on both devices. The colors are a bit more vibrant on the True Tone display. So... and just slightly, like where I noticed it, you're not gonna believe it. On my avatar, red is a great color to use. On my avatar, I saw like the red just like pop. So I was pretty happy with that. So yeah, the True Tone display is definitely a difference. Do you need it? I don't think you need it. I don't think it's something that would. It's just something that's nice to have. So that's definitely a difference that I will give Apple. It's a nice little bonus. I really like it. In terms of cameras, so again, I've got a whole video where I show photos kind of side by side with a little slider. I figured out how to pull it off. That'll be coming soon. The FaceTime camera, the camera that you've got, the selfie camera that faces towards you, I couldn't really see any major differences between the two in terms of the iPhone 7 Plus or the iPhone 8 Plus. There will be somewhat bigger differences between the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 10 with the new sensor array with the Face ID camera apparatus in there. But even then, I don't know if that's going to bring dramatic value to your selfies. It may, but I guess I'm not like a selfie connoisseur. It works. I'm able to use the camera, press the button, takes a picture of me. I'm good to go. But there's no perceivable difference, and I don't take selfies all that often. I'm probably the only person who doesn't. But I'll do it when there's a new little filter. I can put little ears on me or pretend makeup thing. It's kind of neat. I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. But it's a gimmick, right? So in terms of a video camera, I haven't had extensive use with it, but it's better. No doubt about it. If only because you can now record 4K 60 frames per second on the 8 Plus, and the images are always great. As long as I would strongly recommend you have amazing light. And I apologize for the quality of this live stream. I'm trying to push out in 1080p, but I can only push out in 720p. That's just a limitation on either my hardware or the software that I'm using. But the only way to toggle that video camera setting, if you didn't know, on the iPhone 8 Plus, or any camera or device that supports it, you have to turn off or you have to toggle off the high efficiency, effectively the formatting, and go with most compatible. Oh wait, no, you have to turn off most compatible and go with high efficiency in order to toggle 4K video recording 60 frames per second. That was something that I noticed, which makes sense. You want to have the file itself, which is going to be gigantic, to be less than it needs to be, and that's exactly why you have to turn on the high efficiency format in order for that to toggle. The only reason I would expect you to turn that off is if you don't have another device and you're running into compatibility issues. Once Mac OS High Sierra is released in the next couple of days, I would recommend turning on high efficiency. Even Microsoft today released an update to Windows 10, giving you the high efficiency codecs to be able to look at content that was recorded in that format. So kudos to Microsoft for being a little quicker on the draw than Apple with that compatibility, slightly. So the video camera is great. I noticed a lot as I was using the camera more and more. The handshake compensation on the 8 is fantastic, and the 8 Plus is fantastic. So as we're in this topic, like I would just notice it, like, wow, it's like just a light handshake. I mean, even if I'm holding still, like I'd press the button, I didn't get the right shot with the 7 Plus, but I just hold it. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like the stabilization improvement is, I would say, dramatic. Like anytime you introduce that level of stabilization to a product, it becomes dramatic. So the 8 Plus definitely has it over the 7 Plus in terms of that stabilization. That is absolutely going to translate into better videos, better photos, outright. I'm very, very happy to see less blur with certain subjects that are moving, and you'll see examples in the photo comparison video outright. But even in the initial review, initial impressions, there's less blur in low light situations with the camera app. Like with the iPhone 7 Plus, you kind of pan around in a low light situation and things kind of blur. Things don't blur as much, even when you're not recording video or taking photos. Things don't blur as much with the viewfinder on the camera app, which again speaks to the quality of hardware in conjunction with the software. I'm sure that Apple's kind of put into it. So definitely a step up in terms of photo quality. In terms of HDR photos, this is something you'll see demonstrated. Better low light color and saturation on the 8 Plus. The better whites I think they're better. There's a better white contrast on the 7 Plus in certain situations. But like for HDR, this is something you also have to toggle in settings. If you notice your HDR button is missing, the way to toggle it on again is to go back into camera settings and turn off auto HDR. I don't like the camera deciding for me like whether it's a good time for HDR or not, because more often than not it's wrong. Sorry iOS, but your AI is still off base. So I have it turned on, and I have to, this is another annoying thing. I always have to go in, turn it on, 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 turn it on. We got another super chat message. Liz says, did Diana upgrade her phone? No, she is going to be getting the iPhone 7 Plus here. No sense in wasting it. So it's going to effectively move down like that. We're not in a situation where we can afford to upgrade everything. Then the 6S may pass along to somebody else, or we'll sell it. So anyway, so this is where it's kind of difficult to go back and forth with chat, but see, less blur photos, HDR. I always want to keep it on, but iOS always seems to turn it off every time, and it's annoying. I just want it always on. There's no reason for me to turn it off, especially now with the higher quality HDR imagery on the iPhone 8 Plus palpably. Now, if there's one reason to drive an upgrade, it would specifically be in the value of the iPhone 8 Plus camera over the 7 Plus camera. It's better. Video recording all the way to photo shooting, as you'll see demonstrated. It is better, incrementally, but that's been an incremental improvement enough for me, because it's like, the way I look at it is like, you can only take a photo once, and that's it. So you better have a camera on you that you're going to get the best photo you can possibly get, and that's driven my purchasing decisions, all the way, through. Now, if another camera phone comes along, a smartphone comes along that takes better photos and offers a better software experience, that's my shrug emoji. I like that. That's my best. I'm not exactly ASCII art, but I love ASCII art, still do. In terms of the flash, now I'm not talking about the classic flash that everyone wanted on the phone that I thought was a horrible idea because it was a resource hog. The slow sync flash on the 8 Plus works very well in terms of preserving colors. In low light situations, it's definitely a standout. Definitely better than the 7 Plus outright. Minus one aspect, and that is that sometimes the flash itself will overexpose in certain areas of an image that may not be white. So if there's an external light source in that shot that you're taking, you may end up getting overexposed areas in the shot. So just be forewarned, if you're going to use a flash, don't have an external light source like a window or anything like that. Otherwise, you'll see a kind of effectively an overexposure in spots. This is also something I will have demonstrated in the upcoming video. One thing that I noticed in the camera too is that it now has haptic feedback, so the shutter speed is effectively 0. It doesn't feel any faster, but the haptic feedback it threw me off. I was like, I'd take a picture on the 8 Plus, I'm like, did it? Yeah, I got a little haptic feedback when I pressed the button. It takes pictures quickly, but I never thought that the 7 Plus was any slouch. 7 Plus does not have that haptic feedback. The 8 Plus does. I'm not saying that's the value. I'm saying that Apple has improved the process such that there's 0 shutter lag, or pretty darn close to it. But again, I didn't think that the iPhone 7 Plus was all that bad. In terms of portrait lighting, in my experimentation with portrait lighting, and I did try it with Diana yesterday. She's a subject that stays still. I tried it also with one of Jedi's Star Wars figures, the figurines. You'll see that demonstrated in tomorrow's video, comparing portrait mode. But portrait lighting is interesting. I think with the right shot, it could work. The problem is Apple still hasn't tweaked its algorithms. It was beta last year. I think it still is beta. It's gimmicky. I don't like it. I think it's fine, but okay, I guess people want it. I don't think it works well. It's like Siri. It's a Sex Panther. So to me, portrait lighting is a Sex Panther feature. 60% of the time, it works all the time. And you definitely run into issues if you have, less than pristine lighting conditions, or let's say gaps. Like if you have like a gap under here and like not around here, it won't process down here, but it'll process here. It crops in too closely to the face, and then someone ends up with an indentation. It's not good. So yeah, you get the portrait lighting feature. It's neat, but it's gimmicky. I don't think portrait lighting should push any kind of purchasing decision. And I'm saying that knowing full well that this is one of the values of the iPhone 10. But it's gimmicky, and it doesn't work well all the time. So do you want to sit around and try to get the perfect shot, or just want to take a picture and move on with your life because you have better things to do? That's up to you. But don't be lulled into this value that just I 40% of the time. That's me being generous with it. It's neat but gimmicky. I don't use it because you can't count on it. So Touch ID, same speed. Siri, same Siri, which is not a positive. So the features, a lot of the flagship features, or the features in the former flagship product, the iPhone 7 Plus, work just as well on the iPhone 8, but I wouldn't say any better. In terms of speakers, now it's been said that the iPhone 8 has a 25% boost. It does sound louder, which is kind of better. But here's the thing. I noticed yesterday I was in an app and it was playing sounds and it was cracking and popping. Like, have you ever turned up a speaker too loud and it distorts? There's something going on. They haven't tweaked the audio algorithm, or the hardware it ain't what they claim it to be. I don't know what they improved, but it definitely did not, it didn't sound good when it was cracking and popping. Then someone on Twitter today asked if I noticed the same thing with the phone call. I have not, but I guess someone out there has noticed the same kind of cracking, popping, and distortion in audio on the iPhone 8 Plus speaker. Allegedly it is louder, but be forewarned, it may not be better outright. Will they improve it? I don't know. But given that I've tried different apps, native apps, and third-party apps that have had this issue, it would seem to me to be related to hardware. That's not a good sign at all for the iPhone 8 Plus. This louder speaker. It is louder with distortion as a bonus. See, you get a free feature. You get distortion. I see some people are joining this video a little late, and they're asking questions that I have covered already in this video. So I am paying attention to chat. What I'd really like to do with these live videos is set the topic, and then after I've covered it, if I'm not able to see Super Chat, is to go back and answer questions in a rapid-fire way and do AMAs. So we'll do that. So in terms of value, now that I've pretty much run through everything, the 7 Plus is almost the same as the 8 Plus. The only reason that I could see anybody wanting to upgrade outright for all the aforementioned reasons or the aforementioned points that I covered is specifically the camera. That I think is what would drive the purchase. Is it warranted to spend as much money on that camera? Maybe if you're in a plan, yes. Outright, I don't know if I can make that leap. So again, you can get the same types of features, generally speaking, on an older device. Mostly. It's an incremental improvement. But, you might say, well, people are going to wait for the 10. I would say the 10 is a step backwards in so many ways. I know, OLED screen. I know, I get it. And the Face ID, I get it. But it's just because it's newer, doesn't necessarily mean that it's better in every possible way. It's very difficult for me to recommend the 8 Plus to everybody. If you have a 7 Plus and it's working just fine and you don't see the jank, stick with the 7 Plus. If the jank drives you nuts, the 8 Plus is going to do you better. If you use your camera on your phone all the time and you want a solid picture, a great picture, the iPhone 8 Plus demonstrably will create, by and large, better photos for you. Of course, it's all down to this. The camera, this doesn't take the pictures. This right here doesn't take the pictures. This takes the pictures. Keep that in mind. The best camera is the camera you have on you. Is it a warranted upgrade? I don't know, man. iOS is not something I'm going to make an excuse for. It works a little better on the iPhone 8, but not much. Just a little. It's can that improve? Sure. In fact, I'm not, really feeling like I want to do the final review of the iPhone 8 Plus until after 11.1 is released, the final version, because I plan on doing a week review of the iPhone 8 Plus after using it for a week. But the final review, my final statement, will likely only happen won't happen until after I've been using it for a month's time. And then a lot of the questions that you're asking can be looped back on. So now paying attention to the chat here, I'm seeing a lot of interactivity, and I really, really appreciate the level of interactivity here. Duff's Wildlife asks, from the 6 Plus, worth the upgrade? Yes and no. So, for example, on the 6 Plus, one of the reasons I didn't like it is because there was frame drops with the 3D touch animation. Here's the problem. 3D touch animation is just as bad on the 8 Plus as it is on the 7 Plus as it is on the 6 Plus. So some things don't improve. So that's what I'm sitting here telling you. Some of these software problems that don't need to be software problems, they just don't improve with newer hardware. So be careful being lulled into this false sense of it's going to get better, because not everything will. That was one thing that drove me nuts about the 6 Plus. 7 Plus addressed it briefly in an update, and then they regressed and introduced a whole bunch of other problems. So animations don't get better. They don't necessarily get better wholesale on the 8 Plus. Going from a 6 Plus to an 8 Plus, you may see marginal improvements in speed. I don't know if you're going to see marginal improvements with your photo quality, because I actually liked, in many cases, the 6S camera better than I liked the 7 Plus camera. And I said that even last year around that time when I was running tests. It's hard for me to recommend the upgrade for anybody, outright, wholesale. Some people do, and they want that leap. I think you may be waiting a long time to get the upgrade that is a warranted upgrade. To me, the value of the iPhone, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So you have to take a look at the features and know those features and how they're going to benefit you to decide whether or not you want that. Like I said, a lot of the features that I see in the 8 Plus are kind of like, that's nice to have, but not the driving point for me. Someone asked if they should remove the transparency. Would that improve the lag? Yeah, it would. You'd think that they would handle it better with their own GPU and their own chipset and everything, but again, they push out specs as though they're irrelevant. Specs are irrelevant. They absolutely are. So you just gotta keep that in mind. How do I send super chat and pay for it? Oh, Shih Tzu is your name. There's a little button. It's got a $sign in it. I don't know. I've never used it before until the other day, and it's like, oh, it's kind of neat. It just kind of bubbles up your comment, and I'm able to see it. Stand out above the rest. Maybe worth the upgrade since I have an iPhone SE, says Devin Groover. In terms of speed, yes. In terms of quality, no. And I'm saying this having seen an iPhone SE. I believe iOS handles better on lower resolution phones. Not to mention, you're talking about a completely different use case too. Like when you make the leap from an SE to a giant, perceivably giant phone, it is a tremendous leap forward in terms of usability. And you will find your usability changing. Throw single-handed usage out the window, despite the improvements they may have made in software. You can now toggle like a single-handed keyboard on the iPhone 8 Plus screen, though they really messed with the iPhone 8 Plus. This is really an iOS issue. The iPhone iOS 11 landscape keyboard is now artificially smaller, I think they did it because we have to suffer for the sins of the iPhone 10 screen. So when I'm saying if you get a better experience with a lower resolution device, keep in mind what's about to come down the pike. The iPhone 10 doesn't exactly have a small resolution. Apple's got a problem with pushing pixels across the screen. So if you think there's a problem with an older device with a lower resolution running iOS, how do you think a newer device, even with the faster processor, is going to handle it? I don't think it's going to handle it very well at all. I think there's going to be more dramatic problems on top of glaring UI and UX issues. I'm with Corey Moore. Need more skeuomorphism. I never had a problem with it because each app could have its own personality. I liked that. It created consistency in having inconsistency. And now with the whole idea of flat design, it just gets rid of any personality, and it makes it that much more critical for you to create a cohesive experience. And I don't know if anybody's ever done that. Any company, any entity has done that. I'm just watching comments as I see them come across, looking for ones that, I think are interesting comments to share. Are there any things that I might have missed with this comparison in using this device? Pretty much constantly for the past, ever since I got the iPhone 8 Plus. Wait, so is the iPhone 8 smoother than the iPhone 8 Plus since it has smaller resolution? This is the thing that I didn't perceive a noticeable difference between the 7 and the 7 Plus. That's one of the reasons why I went with the 7 Plus over the 7. I did not see any performance differences between the 7 and the 7 Plus. I don't believe, in kind, there's going to be any perceivable difference between the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 7, which again speaks to my assertion that the hardware has now outpaced the software. The software can't keep up. The software is reached peak performance. Like you can throw hardware 3 times as fast and it's going to run perceivably just as well. Which again underscores my point that I've been making for so long. But I think we hit that delta. This is not to be confused with the iPhone 10. I think we hit that delta of software performance in relation to hardware performance with the iPhone 7. The iPhone 7 and the 7 Plus. You can throw hardware that's 4 times as fast, and I don't think the software is going to run any better. It speaks to a lack of quality in the software. So no, I don't believe, based on my experience, that the software is going to run any better on a device with a lower resolution. I will tell you that it may likely run worse on a device with a higher resolution, for sure, because the iPhone has had a problem pushing more pixels across the screen. But it doesn't seem to get better with faster hardware at all. And I'm not the only person to say this. And I've pointed example after example. This is the problem with doing so many videos. People will see one video and then ask a question that's already addressed in another video. I can't sit there and say, watch all my videos. But if you see someone saying something like that, just point them to the video where I talked about it, please. If you don't, I might, if I miss it. Are the 2 speakers actually balanced now, asks Tip O Master. I would say they're balanced. You do get crackling. Like I said, it's a big problem that I hope would be addressed in software, but it seems to be systemic. I can't necessarily replicate the problem either. That's a concern, but I got to give it a couple of software revisions before I, or at least one before I say, okay, dude, this is a problem. And that's a big problem. So see, that's what I'm saying. When you chase specs and you don't push through fit and finish, it's not the idea, it's the implementation. And so Apple, it just has a cavalcade of failures, quite honestly, in terms of implementation. Lack of follow through, lack of follow through. And then they just pile more junk on top of it. So it just compounds. The issue compounds. iOS isn't just one problem, it's a death by 1,000 cuts scenario. Daydream, okay, I don't want to talk about Daydream right now. It's really kind of off topic, but I do have my thoughts on that. I've already talked about why I don't like the iPhone 10. Chris, I suggest you use an iOS 6 iPhone 5. It feels amazing. I have no doubt it does. There's no doubt in my mind. iOS 6 was the last good version of iOS. Period. End of story. It had nothing to do with features. It had everything to do with implementation. What could Apple do differently? I'm not Apple. I can only speculate. I wouldn't mind if Scott Forstall came back. Because you know what? He was probably the closest thing to a protege to Steve Jobs. But he caused friction. Tim Cook doesn't like friction. That's a topic I want to talk about in a future video as well. Because I've got some extensive thoughts. Hivebeard said, I never switched to Apple because I thought the tech was cool. Good on you for taking the right path. Because It's the destination. Just watching for any other comments that may be somewhat worth talking about. We're kind of winding down here now that I've been babbling for the greater part of an hour. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for watching all the way through on this video. I do appreciate it. When will you be doing an Oreo and iOS comparison? I was inclined, and I could do it on the Nexus 6P versus the iPhone 8 Plus, but given that the Pixel 2 is right around the corner, and that I've got it's in my crosshairs, I may wait for the Pixel 2 XL. I'm going to try to get a hold of it or try to find a sponsor for it, find a way to pay for it. That's the thing. These devices, if you can't get a review unit, they're expensive, and I do not have unlimited budget for devices. All the more reasons I appreciate the support that I get from the community, the people who come to chrisperillo.com and pledge, or the people who do super chat. It's helpful. It helps me decide what that decision is going to be. So, I think we're about rounding down, winding down. Sorry, not rounding down. I became a fraction for a second. Francis does note, guys, he's not Apple. He just uses Apple stuff. Thank you. People think I'm Apple QA. Everyone's tweeting me now. It's great, but I'm like, I can't retweet everybody, and even I know I'm going overboard on the iPhone issue on Twitter and certainly on YouTube. But you know what? People want to know, and I feel I have something to say about it. CrusherBad64 says, I upgraded my Nexus 5X to Android Oreo and not one frame drop on a phone that came out in 2015. Seems weird Apple has trouble in this area. So thank you for bringing that up. It actually reminds me of one of my Android go-to guys, Eddie Ringel. I've trusted his view for years, though I can't say that I've agreed with him every time. But I asked him, I said, what is that base level that Google optimizes for the Android experience? I said, is it me or does Android improve over time on older devices? And Eddie says, I know they make a lot of changes that will benefit every device in general. Their build servers also regularly use Nexus 5Xs, I think. That's speculation at this point, but that's telling. If that's true, and I can't verify that, but if they use older devices as their base point for software optimization, that says everything. I don't think Apple does that. I don't even think they use their flagship products for optimization, let alone an older one. But that's been seen over and over and over and over and over again. Moreno asks, and maybe we'll leave this at about the last question unless another super chat comes in. What do you want Apple to do? Put a lower resolution screen on the iPhones and get twice the battery life, or higher resolution screens? They were fine with higher resolution screens. It was a lack of software optimization. I want them to double down on quality control. That's not my job. I'm not QA for Apple. I ain't going to waste my time filing radars that have probably already been filed and will probably get ignored. Apple just doesn't care. They don't care, because if they did, it wouldn't be a problem. That's my problem. And I'm not the only one. So thank you, everybody, for paying attention. Thank you again for all your support. I appreciate it. I'd like to do more live videos with y'all. I'd like to do a dedicated AMA video, maybe once a week, if y'all would be up for it, if we can find the right time where more people could participate. Someone said that Tim Cook should hire me. I don't think they could put up with me. Honestly, because I've got an eye for detail, in terms of saying that's not right. Some people don't want to be told that at all. And I see a lot of pushback on that across platforms. This has nothing to do with just Apple. So, again, I love you. I appreciate you. And may the Force be with you.